Welcome to CIMA F1 Financial Operations Chapter 8. I hope you all downloaded a set of your Express notes and you are all at page 36 so that we can cover together IAS 37 provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets. A very straightforward definition of provisions is a form of liability, but remember it's of uncertain timing or amount. So you could say it's almost a liability. It's similar to the accrual, but it's even slightly more uncertain of timing and amount. So sometimes we may be in the position we may not be able to estimate accurately or know exactly how much the amount is, but we can estimate it based on different experience. And also we don't know exactly when it's to be settled. Could be within 1 month, within 3 months, or whatever, 2 years. So when would this be the case in order to talk about provisions? I think the best case to illustrate this standard is with this diagram we have. And if you go through your notes, page 38, you have a lovely summary diagram. And what you're having to ask yourself, it's a set of questions, and depending which answer you're giving, or whether it's a yes or no type of answer, you're going to take different directions. You're going to decide whether you create a provision, you present it in the financial statements or not. So let's see, what do we need first to say? Is there a present obligation as a result of an obligating event? So we need an obligating event to potentially talk about this type of liability, about this provision. So what is an obligating event? On one hand, could be a legal obligating event, or on the other hand, could also be a constructive liability or event. Or obligation, constructive obligation. Well, everybody understands a legal obligation. We have an agreement, and let's say you buy a car from me, and then in our agreement we have a warranty service, and it's just based on the agreement we provide that particular warranty. And what we have to do with warranties is to make sure, as at the year end, we estimate the amount of warranties that we think people may claim, and then we create a provision. So if they are in relation to the current period, you would have debit, expense, credit provisions. You would reflect the corresponding expense in the statement of comprehensive income at that time. But it's not just a legal obligation that you have to look at. You have to look at constructive obligation. It doesn't have to be in an agreement, in a written legal agreement. Sometimes you may go public and make a statement and create an expectation in your customers to behave a certain way. Or, for instance, if you think in the UK, you go and buy a blouse or a skirt or a pair of trousers in a shop, and what can you do in a few days? If you don't like it, you go back and return it. And it's no legal obligation as such. In many cases, most of the situations would be haven't signed a legal agreement. But why do they give the returns? Because there is an implication, well, that in the market people expect that. It's a constructive liability that these shops have towards you as a customer. So it doesn't have to be a written agreement, but because it's a common practice or a promise that has been made historically, that created a certain expectation. And it's almost like a legal obligation, because if you're not going to do it, okay, maybe they can't take you to court necessarily, but they're not going to come to you and you're going to lose business. So the risk is there. So there is an obligation you have towards your customers, let's say based on past behavior that you created as an expectation. So we evaluated that there is an obligating event of one form or another, constructive or legal. And the next question the next thing we look at is present obligation as a result of an obligating event. Let's say, no, not really. We haven't promised anything publicly. We haven't created certain expectation. There is no legal agreement as such. So what do we ask ourselves in? So what situation would that be? Let's say we fire a person, and we fire them on let's say, whatever grounds, but the person sues us and he says that it's unfair dismissal. So is that a present obligation of an obligating event? And let's say the lawyer tells us, look, the grounds were all fair, nothing to worry about. So the answer is, it's no such obligation as such. So the next question is, however, could this be turned around against us? Could it become a possible obligation? If it's possible, possible means not so likely to happen. So it's a chance of less than 50% for that event to happen. So let's say the lawyer says, no, I told you, there is no way this process, yeah, it will carry on until we can prove the whole thing, but we have no fault, there is no possible obligation. And then you are in the happy situation of saying, fine, then I have to do nothing about this particular situation we are in, the fact that we are sued by an employer, by an employee, and I have nothing to report to the stakeholders as there is no material risk of any form from this transaction. What happens if I'm going back here and there is a present obligation of an obligating event as a result? Well, let's say the answer now is yes. The lawyer says, in fact, you know what, maybe there was a bit of unfair dismissal because you missed to notify the person 3 times in writing and so on. So then what you have to do is to ask yourself, how probable is that to happen? So as a chartered accountant, I will go to the lawyer and say, how probable is for us to lose this trial with this person? And the lawyer may say, well, it's highly probable. Well, if he tells me it's highly probable, it means I'll have to say, can you please, lawyer, give me a reliable estimate? What is your estimation, you as a lawyer, as a specialist, of how much am I going to be exposed in terms of damages and so on I would have to pay? And let's say the guy says, yes, I can give you a reliable estimate. Then in this particular situation, because we have an obligating event and this present obligation results from there, it's a probable event to happen and we have a reliable estimate, we create a provision for the amount that the lawyer tells us. So if he tells us the damage is going to be about 1 million and the transaction is related to an obligating event that has been generated by this obligation towards the employee, then we'll have to provide. So we'll have debit, expense, credit provisions for the $1 million or whatever figure the lawyer gives us in the current period you assessed. Now, if we go back here, maybe the lawyer says, you know, it's not that probable for this to happen, for this outflow to happen. So then you're going to say, oh, is that remote? Is that highly unlikely to happen? Very small chance. And he may say yes, and then we are again in the case of do nothing. But if he says, well, it's not really remote, it could be large, but I cannot put a value on it. It could be like maybe $1 million, but you know, it could be like $50,000. And even if you're a $1 million company, obviously it's quite a difference to have $1 million versus a 50K. So it depends on materiality here, the range that he gives you, because if he says it's between $10 and $20 and you're a $1 billion company, probably you don't care. But if it is a material figure or a material interval or range, you're going to say, okay, I cannot ignore it because that will hit the stakeholders a bit later. What I'll have to do is to present a contingent liability. So what is a contingent liability? It is not something you include in the statement of financial position or in statement of comprehensive income. It is only a note to the financial statements. It's only a disclosure whereby you are explaining the situation you are in, the amounts that you potentially are exposed to pay in the future, the reason why you are exposed to that situation, and so on. So all you are doing, you're providing relevant information to stakeholders. Okay, let's get back here. If it's probable, we are saying outflow, yes. Is it reliable? We said no. We go back to contingent liability. So you have a few situations that take you to contingent liability here. a situation where you need to meet 3 criteria at the same time to take you to a provision. And of course, in case there is no possible obligation and, you know, the outflows are not at all probable but are very, very unlikely to affect your company, then there could be a situation where you really have to do nothing. And in fact, you have applied the judgment of IAS 37 and you have the comfort you don't have to present anything to stakeholders. Okay, I think this is a very useful diagram for you to be aware of. One more thing I'd mention here, you heard about provisions, you heard about contingent liability. As it exists a contingent liability, you may have a contingent asset. So remember, there could be the situation, because I took a legal suit, that you may sue someone and you may be expecting $1 million in damages. Are you going to get really excited and record it in the statement of financial position? The answer is no, because you overstate your assets. You are not certain about that particular outflow of resources towards your company. So what you do, you're gonna wait till the final decision is made. Only then you recognize it as a contingent asset. Otherwise, you simply ignore it. So you could see a bit of a prudence concept here, whereby the contingent liabilities, you immediately mention if you can put an amount on it and it's material, you may have to provide for it, but you're not anticipating the good news. The contingent assets will be mentioned only when you are virtually certain that it's going to occur. When a decision that that cannot be contested has taken place, and then you can say, yes, it is my asset, I'm going to receive that money, I'm going to reflect it into my notes or maybe financial statements. Okay, have a read through the remaining chapter. I hope you got a flavor for IAS 37, and please make sure you practice questions, because with IAS 37 it's not going to be the numbers that will challenge you, it's going to be the judgment. So you have to be ready to play with that diagram and decide whether you create a provision, you have to deal with a contingent liability, or just do nothing. Thank you so much, and all the best with prepping. Good luck.